These are the ground beef recipes that once fed America. Before fast food chains and frozen aisles, families depended on ground beef to survive. It stretched meals, filled hungry plates, and carried households through war, depression, and uncertainty. These dishes were not trends. They were solutions. They were cooked after long workdays, during cold winters, and in kitchens where nothing was wasted. Ground beef became the backbone of American home cooking because it was affordable, flexible, and dependable. Today, most of these meals are forgotten, replaced by convenience and speed. But forgetting them means losing the stories of how families endured when resources were limited and choices were few. This video uncovers 10 ground beef recipes that quietly carried a nation through its hardest years. Each one reveals how Americans cooked when money was tight and hope was fragile. Stay with this story, because these recipes are more than food. They are proof of survival, discipline, and everyday strength that once fed America. Hamburger gravy on mashed potatoes. In the early decades of the 20th century, this dish was not comfort food by choice. It was comfort food by necessity. Hamburger gravy on mashed potatoes appeared on American tables when money was scarce and certainty was rare. During the Great Depression and wartime years, ground beef offered families a reliable way to stretch a single pound into a full meal. Every ingredient had a purpose. Nothing was decorative. The process was simple and intentional. Ground beef was browned slowly, often without oil, because fat was already precious. Flour was stirred directly into the pan to thicken the drippings, followed by milk or water, depending on what the household could afford. The result was a thick, savory gravy poured over plain mashed potatoes. There were no side dishes. This meal stood alone. What made hamburger gravy powerful was not its flavor alone. It was filling. It stayed warm. It fed children who had worked all day and adults who would rise before dawn. In many homes, this dish appeared several nights a week, each time slightly different, depending on availability. Sometimes onions were added. Sometimes pepper was the only seasoning. For families living paycheck to paycheck, hamburger gravy represented control in an uncontrollable world. It proved that a hot meal could still appear, even when cupboards looked empty. It taught thrift, patience, and respect for food. Today, this recipe has nearly vanished, dismissed as plain or outdated. But it once carried weight far beyond the plate. Hamburger gravy on mashed potatoes was not about indulgence. It was about endurance. Remembering it means remembering how ordinary families survived with dignity, resourcefulness, and resolve during America's hardest years. Poor man's steak. Long before restaurant menus dressed it up, poor man's steak was a working family solution. This dish appeared during the late 19th century and surged during the Great Depression, when real cuts of steak were out of reach. Ground beef replaced expensive meat, shaped by hand, stretched with bread or crackers, and cooked with care. The goal was simple: make it feel like steak even when it was not. Poor man's steak was often pan-fried or baked, then finished in a thin brown gravy. The gravy mattered. It added moisture, flavor, and the illusion of abundance. Served with potatoes or boiled vegetables, the meal looked complete, even generous. Appearance mattered when morale was low. This recipe thrived because it respected limits. It used inexpensive beef. It welcomed leftovers. It allowed seasoning to change with the household. Some families added onions. Others used salt and pepper alone. No version was wrong, as long as it fed everyone at the table. Poor man's steak carried emotional weight. It let parents serve something familiar when times felt unfamiliar. It allowed dignity to remain intact, even when money did not. Children grew up believing they were eating steak, because the ritual felt real. Today, this dish is rarely cooked, replaced by convenience foods and packaged meals. But poor man's steak once filled plates across America. It stands as a reminder that creativity and restraint built meals that sustained families when pride and survival shared the same kitchen. Remembering it matters today. These meals explain how scarcity shaped habits, values, and tastes. They teach patience, planning, and respect for food. Watching this story through reveals how ordinary kitchens answered extraordinary pressure, one careful meal at a time. It mattered because survival depended on choices repeated every single day then. Slumgullion. Slumgullion was never meant to be elegant. It was born in mining camps, railroad crews, and frontier towns where ground beef had to feed many mouths with little planning. The name itself reflected hardship, yet the meal delivered reliability when conditions were unstable and supplies uncertain. This dish combined ground beef with potatoes, onions, and whatever vegetables were available. Everything cooked in one pot. There were no strict measurements. Cooks relied on instinct and necessity. Beef provided strength. Potatoes provided bulk. The result was thick, hearty, and filling enough to carry workers through exhausting days. Slumgullion spread beyond camps and into American homes during the early 20th century. Families adopted it because it reduced waste and saved fuel. One pot meant less firewood, less cleanup, and fewer ingredients. During the Great Depression, this mattered. Every resource counted. The emotional value of Slumgullion matched its practicality. It offered predictability in unpredictable times. Children recognized the smell. Adults trusted the result. Even when ingredients changed, the meal still felt familiar and secure. Today, Slumgullion is rarely mentioned in cookbooks or kitchens. Its rough name and humble appearance caused it to fade from memory. But forgetting it erases the reality of how Americans ate when convenience did not exist. Slumgullion was not about flavor trends or presentation. It was about survival, shared labor, and making do without complaint. Remembering this meal honors the workers and families who depended on simple food to endure long days, harsh weather, and uncertain futures. It fed America quietly, one pot at a time. This recipe proved that simplicity could build resilience. It required attention, not excess. When people remember Slumgullion, they remember cooperation, shared pots, and the quiet understanding that survival depended on everyone eating every single night. Without waste or hesitation from anyone. Cottage pie. Cottage pie, as it appeared in American kitchens, was a practical adaptation of an old European favorite. During the early 1900s, immigrant families brought the concept across the Atlantic but changed it to suit limited ingredients and tight budgets. Ground beef replaced more expensive cuts, and mashed potatoes topped the dish, creating a complete meal that could feed an entire family with minimal effort. The preparation was straightforward yet purposeful. Ground beef was browned, often with onions, and mixed with whatever vegetables were on hand, carrots, peas, or corn. A light sauce or gravy bound the ingredients together. Mashed potatoes were spread over the top, sometimes smoothed with a fork to create a simple decorative pattern. The pie was then baked until the top turned lightly golden, signaling warmth, fullness, and home. What made this recipe vital was its ability to stretch. A single pound of beef could become several servings when combined with potatoes and vegetables. Leftovers were common, reheated for another meal without losing texture or flavor. Families learned early that cottage pie was a solution to limited resources, turning humble ingredients into a satisfying dinner. Beyond its practicality, cottage pie carried emotional weight. It represented care, comfort, and a sense of tradition, connecting families to both their heritage and the reality of American life. It was a meal that could warm hearts as well as stomachs. Today, this dish is often overlooked, replaced by quicker casseroles or prepackaged meals. But remembering cottage pie honors the resilience and resourcefulness of early American households. It is a reminder that ingenuity, thrift, and attention to simple ingredients once sustained families, keeping them nourished and connected in the toughest of times. Hamburger rice casserole. During the 1940s and 1950s, Hamburger rice casserole became a staple in many American homes. It was a dish born from necessity and practicality. With ground beef being affordable and rice widely available, families discovered a way to stretch ingredients into a meal that could satisfy both children and adults. The casserole was simple to assemble, filling to eat, and adaptable to what was on hand. Ground beef was browned in a skillet, often with onions or a few leftover vegetables. Seasonings were minimal: salt, pepper, and sometimes a dash of paprika, but the flavor was enhanced when combined with a thickened sauce or canned soup. Cooked rice was folded into the mixture, absorbing juices and creating a hearty base. The combination was then placed in a baking dish, topped lightly with crumbs or cheese when available, and baked until warm and slightly golden. This dish was valued not just for taste, but for efficiency. Leftovers could be refrigerated and served again, making it ideal for families with limited time or multiple meals to prepare. It demonstrated a practical ingenuity, turning inexpensive ingredients into a dish that felt substantial, nourishing, and even celebratory on special occasions. Hamburger rice casserole also carried emotional significance. It was a dish mothers and grandmothers could rely on to feed hungry children after school or laborers returning home from long workdays. It reinforced the idea that resourcefulness was a form of love. Though largely forgotten today, this casserole reflects how Americans adapted simple staples into meals that were both comforting and economical. Remembering it preserves the story of a time when families relied on creativity, thrift, and care to put food on the table and keep their households fed. Meat and potato skillet. Meat and potato skillet was one of the most practical ground beef recipes in American history. Emerging in the early 20th century, it became a household favorite during the Great Depression and wartime years. Families needed meals that were affordable, filling, and easy to prepare. This dish met every requirement. It was simple, requiring only ground beef, potatoes, onions, and minimal seasoning, yet it provided both nourishment and comfort. The preparation was straightforward. Ground beef was browned in a skillet, releasing natural juices that became the base for the entire meal. Potatoes, peeled and diced, were added directly to the pan. Onions, when available, brought additional flavor. The mixture was cooked slowly over medium heat, allowing the potatoes to absorb the beef's richness. Sometimes a small amount of water or broth was added to create a light gravy that kept the dish moist. The result was a single-pan meal that fed an entire family. What made meat and potato skillet remarkable was its adaptability. Ingredients could vary depending on what was in the kitchen. Leftover vegetables, scraps, or even a little cheese could be added without changing the essence of the dish. This flexibility made it a staple in households with limited resources. The emotional significance of this recipe was as important as its practicality. It represented stability in uncertain times, a way for parents to ensure their children were fed and satisfied. The aroma of meat and potatoes sizzling in a skillet became a symbol of home, warmth, and care. Today, meat and potato skillet is rarely served in modern kitchens, replaced by convenience meals and frozen dinners. Yet remembering it preserves a story of resourcefulness, endurance, and family. This humble recipe reflects how ordinary Americans turned limited ingredients into sustenance, proving that even the simplest dishes could carry meaning and comfort across generations. Mock meatloaf patties. Mock meatloaf patties were a practical solution for American families when budgets were tight and ovens were small or unavailable. This recipe gained popularity in the 1930s and 1940s. A period when households needed to feed multiple mouths without relying on expensive cuts of meat. Ground beef, mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, or even soaked crackers, became the base. The mixture was shaped into individual patties rather than a single loaf, allowing for faster cooking and easier portioning. The patties were typically pan-fried or baked, sometimes topped with a thin tomato sauce or gravy for flavor and moisture. Vegetables, if on hand, could be added directly to the mixture, making each patty slightly different depending on the household's supplies. The simplicity of the ingredients did not diminish the satisfaction of a warm, protein-rich meal. It was practical, filling, and adaptable. Mock meatloaf patties offered more than nourishment. They provided structure and routine for families struggling with uncertainty. Parents could serve a familiar meal that felt substantial, even when money or ingredients were scarce. Children recognized the texture and flavor, creating a sense of normalcy in unpredictable times. The emotional weight of this dish was significant. It showed ingenuity, care, and attention to family needs, even under pressure. Unlike elaborate meals, these patties emphasized efficiency without sacrificing sustenance. Today, mock meatloaf patties are largely forgotten, replaced by prepackaged foods and convenience cooking. Yet they reveal an important part of American culinary history, how resourcefulness and thoughtful preparation allowed families to thrive on limited means. Remembering this humble recipe honors the resilience, creativity, and determination that once defined home cooking in America's most challenging years. Chipped beef and hamburger mix. Chipped beef and hamburger mix was a practical and economical dish that became a lifeline for American families during the early to mid-20th century. Often served in homes where meat needed to stretch across multiple meals, this recipe combined ground beef with thinly sliced or dried beef, creating a savory, protein-rich dish that could feed a family without requiring large quantities of fresh meat. Preparation was straightforward but purposeful. Ground beef was browned in a skillet, and chopped or rehydrated dried beef was added to intensify flavor. A simple pan gravy, made from drippings, flour, and milk or water, bound the mixture together. Sometimes onions or seasonings like salt and pepper were included, depending on availability. The final mixture was served over bread, biscuits, or potatoes, turning limited ingredients into a satisfying and filling meal. This dish became particularly common during the Great Depression and wartime periods, when rationing and scarcity demanded creativity in the kitchen. Chipped beef and hamburger mix allowed families to provide hearty meals while conserving resources, turning inexpensive ingredients into something that felt generous and complete. Beyond practicality, the recipe carried emotional significance. It symbolized care, thrift, and resourcefulness. Parents who served it demonstrated their ability to nourish and protect their families, even in difficult times. The aroma alone could provide reassurance that dinner was ready and hunger would be satisfied. Today, chipped beef and hamburger mix has largely disappeared from American tables, replaced by modern convenience meals. Remembering it highlights the ingenuity of households facing scarcity and the quiet resilience embedded in everyday cooking. This humble combination of ground beef and dried meat tells a story of survival, adaptability, and the enduring importance of family meals. Beef mulligan stew. Beef mulligan stew was a dish born out of necessity, a practical and nourishing meal for families who faced scarcity and uncertainty. Popular during the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, this stew was a way to make a little meat feed many mouths. Ground beef, when available, became the foundation, stretched with potatoes, onions, carrots, and whatever vegetables or grains were on hand. The preparation emphasized efficiency. Ground beef was browned in a pot, creating a rich base of flavor. Vegetables were chopped and added directly, sometimes with water or broth to create a thin, hearty stew. Seasonings were minimal: salt, pepper, and occasionally a bay leaf, but the dish absorbed the essence of every ingredient. Everything cooked together slowly, producing warmth, sustenance, and comfort for families after long workdays. Beef mulligan stew was adaptable. Leftovers could be reheated without losing texture or flavor, making it ideal for households that needed to maximize every resource. Its one-pot preparation saved fuel and minimized cleanup, important considerations during difficult economic times. Emotionally, this stew carried reassurance. Families relied on it not only to fill stomachs but also to maintain a sense of normalcy. The aroma of simmering beef and vegetables became synonymous with home, care, and endurance. Today, beef mulligan stew is nearly forgotten, replaced by modern convenience meals. Yet it reminds us that resourcefulness defined American cooking during hard times. Remembering this dish honors the creativity, resilience, and practicality of the families who relied on it to survive. Every spoonful once told a story of endurance, thrift, and the quiet power of a shared meal. Hamburger hash. Hamburger hash was a staple in American kitchens when efficiency and thrift were more important than presentation. This dish became popular during the Great Depression and continued through the mid-20th century because it allowed families to turn small amounts of ground beef into a filling, complete meal. Nothing went to waste. Leftover vegetables, cooked potatoes, or even bits of bread could be incorporated, creating a hearty dish that satisfied hunger while stretching limited resources. The preparation was practical. Ground beef was crumbled and browned in a skillet. Potatoes, diced or shredded, were added next, followed by onions or other vegetables if available. The mixture was cooked over medium heat until golden and crisp in places, with seasonings kept simple: salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of paprika. Some households added a splash of broth or water to create moisture, ensuring the hash remained tender and flavorful. Hamburger hash was more than just a meal. It carried emotional significance. Families relied on it for dinner after long workdays, providing warmth and nourishment. Children grew accustomed to its taste and texture, associating the aroma of sizzling beef and potatoes with home. It demonstrated creativity, resourcefulness, and care, turning scarcity into sustenance. Today, hamburger hash is rarely prepared in modern kitchens, often replaced by frozen meals or convenience foods. Yet this humble dish reflects a time when American households relied on practicality, patience, and ingenuity. Remembering hamburger hash preserves the story of families who stretched ingredients, nurtured loved ones, and transformed simple ground beef into sustenance that carried them through hard times. It is a testament to resilience, thrift, and the enduring value of a well-cooked, heartfelt meal.